My name is Grace Mitchell. I'm 34 years old, and I live in a quiet neighborhood outside Seattle with my husband, Ethan, and our 8-year-old daughter, Lily. People often tell me I have a peaceful life. When they see our family pictures, they smile and say, "You have such a beautiful family." I always smile back. I never tell them the truth. The truth is that I haven't felt good enough for my husband for many years. When Ethan and I first met, he made me laugh more than anyone else. We were both young. We dreamed about buying our first home, traveling across America, and raising children together. He was kind, hardworking, and full of hope. I believed we would face every problem as a team. Back then, he looked at me like I was the most important person in the room. I still remember our wedding day. He held my hands and whispered, "I'm the luckiest man alive." I believed every word. I wish I could go back and tell that young woman to hold on to her confidence. Because little by little, it disappeared. It didn't happen overnight. There wasn't one big fight. There wasn't one terrible mistake. It happened through thousands of small moments. After Ethan was promoted at work, he became busier. He worked longer hours and came home tired. At first, I understood. I wanted to support his career, so I tried to make life easier for him. Dinner was always ready before he came home. The house stayed clean. I helped Lily with her homework every evening. I even started working fewer hours at the local library so I could spend more time taking care of our family. I thought he would notice. Instead, he noticed everything that wasn't perfect. One evening, I made roasted chicken with mashed potatoes, one of his favorite meals. He tasted one bite. "The chicken is a little dry," he said. That was all. No, thank you. No smile, just one criticism. I told myself it wasn't important. Everyone has bad days. But the comments kept coming. "The living room is messy." "You forgot to pay the water bill." "You should exercise more." "You used to dress nicer." Sometimes he didn't even realize how sharp his words sounded. Or maybe he did. I wasn't sure anymore. Every time I promised myself I wouldn't let his words hurt me, they still found a way inside my heart. Soon I started apologizing for everything. "I'm sorry." Those became the words I said most often. "I'm sorry dinner is late. I'm sorry I forgot. I'm sorry I'm tired. I'm sorry." One Saturday morning, I stood in front of the bedroom mirror while getting ready for Lily's school concert. I tried on 3 different dresses. None of them felt right. I looked older than I remembered. There were small lines around my eyes. My hair wasn't as shiny as it used to be. I quietly asked Ethan, "Which dress do you like?" He looked up from his phone for only a second. "I guess the blue one." "You don't sound very sure." He shrugged. "I mean, none of them really stand out." He went back to his phone. I stood there holding the dresses, feeling smaller than I had just a minute before. Later that afternoon, at Lily's concert, I saw other couples laughing together. One husband wrapped his arm around his wife while they watched their son perform. Without thinking, I glanced at Ethan. He was answering work emails. I wanted to ask him to put his phone away. Instead, I stayed quiet. That had become my habit. Stay quiet, don't complain, don't make things worse. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat alone in the kitchen with a cup of cold tea. The house was silent. I stared at my reflection in the dark window. For the first time in my life, I whispered something I never thought I would believe. Maybe he's right. Maybe I really wasn't enough. I didn't know it then, but that single thought was the beginning of losing the woman I used to be. After that night, something inside me changed. I still smiled. I still cooked dinner. I still packed Lily's lunch every morning and kissed Ethan goodbye before he left for work. But every time I looked in the mirror, I heard his voice instead of my own. "You used to dress nicer. The chicken is a little dry. None of them really stand out." His words stayed with me longer than they should have. I stopped buying clothes for myself. Whenever I saw a pretty dress in a store, I would pick it up, look at the price tag, and put it back on the rack. "It isn't necessary," I would tell myself. The money could be used for something else. For Ethan, for Lily, for the house. Somehow, I was always the last person on my own list. One afternoon, my best friend Megan invited me to lunch. We had been friends since college, but we hadn't seen each other in months. "You look tired," she said gently after we ordered our food. I laughed. "I'm just busy." She looked at me for a moment. "No, Grace, you're exhausted." I quickly changed the subject. I didn't want to talk about my marriage. I wasn't even sure how to explain it. Ethan wasn't cruel. He never shouted. He never threatened me. He simply made me feel small. That feeling was much harder to describe. Before we left the restaurant, Megan reached across the table and held my hand. "I miss the old Grace," she said softly. The woman who laughed so loudly that everyone turned to look. I forced a smile. "She's still here." But even as I said those words, I wasn't sure they were true. A few days later, Ethan came home later than usual. He looked stressed. His tie was loose, and he rubbed his forehead as he walked into the kitchen. "I made your favorite pasta," I said. He took one bite before asking, "Did you forget the garlic?" I used the amount I always use." "It tastes different." I looked down at my plate. "I'm sorry." He sighed. "You apologize too much." His words surprised me. I looked up. "You've made me feel like I should." The room became quiet. For a second, I thought he might understand. Instead, he simply stood up. "I don't have the energy for this conversation." He carried his plate to the sink and walked upstairs. I stayed at the table alone. Again. That weekend, Lily asked if we could bake chocolate chip cookies together. She loved helping in the kitchen. She always wore a little pink apron that was almost too small for her now. As we mixed the dough, flour covered both of our faces. She laughed so hard that I couldn't help laughing too. For a few wonderful minutes, I forgot everything. When Ethan came home, Lily ran to the front door. "Dad, we made cookies!" She proudly handed him the first one. He took a bite and smiled at her. "They're delicious!" Lily beamed with happiness. Then she looked at me. "Mom made most of them." Ethan nodded. "They're a little sweeter than I like." The smile slowly disappeared from my face. Lily noticed. Children notice more than adults think. That evening, she climbed onto the couch beside me while we watched a movie. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Did Dad not like the cookies?" "He liked them." "But he didn't smile at you." I didn't know what to say. So I kissed the top of her head and said, "Sometimes grown-ups have long days." She accepted my answer. I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, I opened an old photo album. There I was at 25, laughing on the beach, running through the rain with Ethan, holding an ice cream cone and making a silly face at the camera. My eyes looked different back then. They were full of confidence, full of hope. I touched one of the pictures with my fingertips. "When did you disappear?" I whispered to the woman in the photograph. The next morning, I found a drawing Lily had made for school. It showed our family standing together in front of our house. Ethan was tall and smiling. Lily stood beside him, holding his hand. I was standing farther away, smaller than everyone else. When I asked her why she drew me so tiny, she looked at the paper and answered with complete innocence, "I don't know." Then she paused. "Maybe because you're always trying not to bother anyone." Her words settled deep inside my heart. For the first time, I realized something painful. It wasn't only Ethan who saw me disappearing. My daughter could see it too. I couldn't stop thinking about Lily's drawing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the little picture of our family. Ethan stood tall, Lily stood beside him, and I was only a tiny figure in the corner. At first, I told myself it was just a child's drawing. But deep inside, I knew it was much more than that. Children don't always understand everything adults say. They understand how adults make each other feel. That realization stayed with me for days. One Friday afternoon, Lily came home from school quieter than usual. She dropped her backpack by the front door and walked slowly into the kitchen. "How was school?" I asked. She shrugged. "It was okay." Normally, she would tell me every little detail about her day. Something wasn't right. While we prepared dinner together, I noticed she kept staring at the counter instead of talking. Finally, I asked, "Sweetheart, is something bothering you?" She was silent for a long moment. Then she whispered, "A boy in my class said my drawing wasn't pretty." I immediately knelt beside her. "Oh, Lily." She looked at me with watery eyes. "I worked really hard on it." I wrapped my arms around her. "One person's opinion doesn't decide your worth." She leaned against me. "But what if he's right?" Those words hit me harder than she could ever imagine. Because I had been asking myself the same question for years. That evening, after Lily went upstairs to finish her homework, I sat alone in the living room. I kept replaying our conversation. One person's opinion doesn't decide your worth. I had said those words to my daughter. Why couldn't I believe them myself? When Ethan came home, he looked tired again. He loosened his tie and placed his briefcase by the door. "Long day?" I asked. "The longest." I nodded. "Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. During dinner, Lily happily talked about a science project her class was starting. She was excited. "I want to build a model of the solar system," she said. That's nice, Ethan answered, without looking up from his phone. She continued talking anyway. I think Mom can help me paint the planets. Ethan finally looked up. As long as the project is neat. It will be, Lily said proudly. Then he smiled a little and added, just don't let your mother do all the work. He laughed quietly. To him, it was probably just a joke. No one else laughed. Lily looked at me. I looked down at my plate. Dinner ended in silence. Later that night, I tucked Lily into bed. She hugged her favorite stuffed rabbit close to her chest. Mom? Yes? She hesitated. Then she asked the question that changed my life forever. Why does Dad always think you're wrong? I froze. I don't know. She looked so serious. I think you're really nice. My eyes filled with tears. Thank you. She reached out and held my hand. Then she asked, almost in a whisper, Mom, if you're never good enough for Dad, how will I know if I'm ever good enough for someone? The room became completely still. I couldn't breathe. I felt as if my heart had broken into 1,000 pieces. She wasn't only watching our marriage, she was learning from it. She was learning that love meant trying harder and harder just to earn someone's approval. She was learning that saying I'm sorry all the time was normal. She was learning that a woman should become smaller so everyone else could feel bigger. No, I couldn't let that become her future. After she fell asleep, I quietly closed her bedroom door. Instead of going to bed, I walked downstairs. Ethan was sitting on the couch, watching television. He barely looked up. You're still awake? Yes. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. We need to talk. He sighed. Can it wait until tomorrow? No. There was something different in my voice. He muted the television and finally looked directly at me. For the first time in years, I didn't apologize before speaking. I didn't tell myself to stay quiet. I didn't tell myself not to make things worse. I simply stood there. I need you to hear me. He frowned, surprised. I took a slow, deep breath. I've spent years believing I wasn't good enough. His expression changed. And tonight, I continued softly, our daughter made me realize she's starting to believe the same thing about herself. The color slowly disappeared from Ethan's face. He opened his mouth to speak, but for the first time since we had been married, he had no words. Ethan sat quietly on the couch. For the first time in years, neither of us spoke. The television screen was still glowing, but the room felt completely silent. Finally, he looked at me. I never wanted Lily to feel that way, he said. I know, I replied softly, but intentions don't erase the pain. He lowered his head. I didn't realize my words were hurting you. A small part of me wanted to believe him, but another part, the part that had spent years crying alone, needed more than an apology. I've been telling myself that for a long time, I said. I kept hoping one day you would notice. He rubbed his face with both hands. I thought I was helping you improve. I shook my head. You weren't helping me grow. You were teaching me that nothing I did would ever be enough. Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't look away. I stopped believing in myself, Ethan. I stopped recognizing the woman I used to be. He looked at me with sadness I hadn't seen before. I'm sorry. Those two words were something I had wanted to hear for years. But I had also learned something important. An apology is the beginning of change. It is not the change itself. The next morning, I took Lily to school. Instead of driving home immediately, I parked near a small lake. I watched the water move gently in the morning sunlight. For the first time in a long while, I asked myself a simple question. What do I want? Not what Ethan wanted. Not what everyone else expected. What did I want? The answer surprised me. I wanted peace. I wanted confidence. I wanted to laugh again. Most of all, I wanted Lily to grow up knowing that love should never make her feel small. That afternoon, I called the local library where I used to work. A part-time position had opened. The manager remembered me. We'd love to have you back, Grace. When I hung up the phone, I smiled. It was a small step, but it was my step. That evening, Ethan noticed something different. You seem happier, he said. I made a decision today. What decision? I'm going back to work. He looked surprised. For the money? No. For myself. He nodded slowly. I understand. Over the next few weeks, life didn't magically become perfect. Some days were still difficult. Sometimes Ethan caught himself making another critical comment. But instead of staying silent, I calmly answered, That comment hurt me. At first, he seemed surprised every time I spoke honestly. Then, little by little, he began listening. Really listening. A month later, he asked if I would go with him to a marriage counselor. I don't want to lose our family, he said. I agreed. Not because everything was fixed, but because both of us were finally willing to do the work. One evening after dinner, Lily sat at the kitchen table drawing another picture. When she finished, she ran over to me. Mom, look! It was another family portrait. This time, the three of us stood side by side. No one was bigger, no one was smaller. We were all smiling. I felt tears fill my eyes. I love it, I whispered. Lily smiled proudly. I made everyone the same size. I hugged her tightly. She didn't know it, but that little drawing meant more to me than any gift I had ever received. Months later, I walked past the bedroom mirror. Without thinking, I stopped. I looked at my reflection. The lines around my eyes were still there. My hair still wasn't perfect. I wasn't younger. I wasn't prettier. But something had changed. The woman looking back at me no longer seemed afraid. She looked stronger. She looked kinder to herself. She looked enough. I smiled at my reflection. Not because someone else approved of me, but because I finally approved of myself. If someone asks me today whether my marriage was saved, my answer is simple. Our marriage had a second chance because two people chose honesty over silence. But even if it hadn't, I know I would have been okay. Because my worth was never something another person could give me. And it was never something another person could take away. If my story reaches even one person who feels invisible, I hope you remember this. You do not have to become smaller to be loved. The people who truly love you will never ask you to disappear. And the day you begin believing in your own worth is the day your life begins to change.